Welcome to the February 13th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I am Blandy Miller, Chair of the Commission. We have a full agenda today, so I would like to ask everyone to please be efficient in your comments and avoid redundancy so that we can hear from as many viewpoints on as many cases as possible today. Starting off with public comment, we start every meeting with the opportunity for the public to speak on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to committee reports. The first item is rezoning case Z5123. This request appeared on the consent agenda at our December 12th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting, where it was referred to the Committee of the Whole. At that meeting, it was reported out of the committee without recommendation to this meeting. The applicant has submitted signed revised conditions which would remove single and 2-unit living from the list of prohibited uses and made other additions as well. The deadline for the Planning Commission is March 2nd, 2024. I'd like to ask if Matthew Burns might, there he is, provide a brief presentation from staff to review any updates from this case.
So just to clarify, I have not presented this case yet, so I haven't cut it down.
I see.
But I'll be as efficient as I can. Good morning. Matthew Burns, Planning and Development. Z51 is a request to rezone approximately a third of an acre from neighborhood mixed use, 3 stories, with transit overlay district to commercial mixed use, 3 stories, conditional use, with removal of the TOD. And since this case was originally published, there have been 2 major updates, which are the conditions that you mentioned, and also Raleigh Fire has noted the site has some fire service concerns that were missed during the initial review. Zoning in the area is primarily residential and residential mixed use, and the site is zoned and envisioned for neighborhood mixed use. Nearby uses are predominantly moderate and low-scale residential, and the site is next to a roundabout at Bashford and Buck Jones Road, and about 3/4 miles southwest of the Plaza West Shopping Center. There's an existing convenience store on site known as Little Sioux Mini Mart, and it's also adjacent to a U-Haul rental business. There's an existing fuel canopy on site which was constructed around 1991, and per the applicant, the business stopped selling gasoline around 2010. And since then, in August 2022, there was a city-initiated rezoning which applied the TOD to about 600 acres along the Western Boulevard corridor. TODs prohibit many vehicle-serving uses, including vehicle fuel sales and car washes. So since publication on the December agenda, the applicant has submitted revised conditions that prohibit many uses that are normally permitted, limited, or special uses in CX, establish that a bar, tavern, nightclub, or lounge will be subject to neighborhood mixed use, limited use standards, limit the number of vehicles capable of being served by vehicle fuel sales to 4, require car wash-related machines such as vacuums to be at least 50 feet from a residential district, require the accessory car washing be fully automated so that drivers would have to remain in their vehicles, prohibit fuel canopies from being backlit, and limit the height of fuel canopies. Condition number 8 establishes Bill 2 requirements for new buildings not intended for vehicle fuel sales. This approximates a frontage. A frontage is recommended for the site based on its location in a frequent transit area and a BRT area. So along Buck Jones Road, a building would have to have a built-to range of 0 to 50 feet, with 50% of the building width, or 25% building width, depending on if Buck Jones is designated as a primary or secondary street. It also establishes a variable lot width for purposes of calculating the build-to range based on nearby impediments or obstructions that may be located perpendicular or parallel to the right-of-way. So this includes things such as riparian buffers, floodways, tree conservation areas, etc. And this condition is largely based on UDO standards for build-to. It would require at least 1 primary street-facing entrance on each new building, prohibit parking between the new building and Buck Jones, require a streetscape be built to Main Street or mixed-use standards, and reiterate that this will only apply to new buildings not intended for vehicle fuel sales. On this table, existing zoning indicates units that could be delivered based on the affordability bonus granted by the TOD. Removing the TOD removes the potential bonus for affordable housing by 5 units, as well as reducing the potential square footage bonus for max gross office square footage. Compared to citywide averages, the area request is more pedestrian-friendly, more transit-friendly, has very high access to jobs, much lower transportation costs. It has a lower bike score than average with minimal nearby infrastructure. The area of request is served by Go Raleigh Route 11, the Buck Jones connector, which connects NC State with Plaza West. And the site's located within a 1/4 mile walking distance of the proposed BRT station along the western corridor. As the request would remove the TOD, the proposed zoning would remove the potential bonus for affordable housing. The request does not include subsidized units, as the intent would be to apply CX zoning with conditions limiting commercial uses. And it permits a variety of housing types, allows smaller units, and is within walking distance of transit. Residents on site are less likely to be racial minorities and more likely to be low income than the city average. And census data is incomplete for this tract, but the cost of rent has increased more slowly than the city average. The request is inconsistent with the future land use map designation of neighborhood mixed use, which recommends NX as the closest zoning district. And approval will require a future land use map amendment from neighborhood mixed use to community mixed use. And the request is inconsistent with the urban form map in that it does not include an urban frontage, but as I mentioned, condition number 8 approximates a frontage for buildings not intended for fuel sales. Overall, it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. It is consistent with policies related to buffering and the design of commercial uses, since it prohibits many commercial uses. And it's inconsistent with a number of policies related to development in areas close to existing and planned transit. And your deadline for action is March 2nd, and let me know if I can answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Pulling up this case again. For this item, we have not heard any presentations, so we will receive a full applicant presentation and hear from the public. So I'd ask, moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission. Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners, here on behalf of Little Sioux Mini Mart, a convenience store and former gas station at 430 Buck Jones Road. Osmi Sadair is the owner of 430 Buck Jones Road, and his nephew, Mark Samore, is the manager and operator of Little Sioux Mini Mart. So this rezoning seeks to rezone property from NX3 to CX3 conditional use and would remove the Western Boulevard TOD. We have included zoning conditions to address inconsistencies with the future land use map and the urban form map recommendations. And approval of this rezoning would allow Little Sioux Mini Mart to modernize its business, restart the vehicle fuel sales use, and create a more durable business moving forward. So the site in and of itself is within the kind of western boundary of Raleigh city limits. Matt laid out the timeline fairly well, but again, the current property owner took title to the property in 1990, installed the vehicle fuel pumps and canopies in 91. And then around 2010, Little Sioux Mini Mart discontinued the vehicle fuel sales use. The canopy's still there, the underground fuel tanks are still there as well. With the approval of the Western Boulevard TOD and the amount of time that had lapsed since Little Sioux Mini Mart had sold gasoline, we could not restart that use as a legal non-conforming use, and we must come before you to rezone the property to remove the TOD and create a zoning district that will permit the vehicle fuel sales on this site. So as Matt mentioned, the existing zoning is NX3. The property to the north and the west is zoned RX3. Those are the Arbor Creek Garden Apartments. Properties across Bashford Road are zoned R10, and the Roiling Acres subdivision is zoned R4 with a NCOD. And all of the properties northwest of the roundabout have the TOD overlay. Hopefully you can see this. If not, I've got a more zoomed in slide as well, but this shows the TOD from Interstate 40 just east of 440. The property is outlined in red, and this removal of the TOD here would not create a hole within the center or the core of the TOD. It would remove a piece that is on the southern boundary of the TOD. This slide again shows that overlay a little bit more zoomed in, and hopefully you can see kind of the site on the periphery of the TOD. Future land use map designates the property as neighborhood mixed use. I will note that vehicle fuel sales is a limited use that is permitted in the NX district. The reason that we are rezoning to CX is because there are limited use standards in the NX district that this property cannot meet. Again, it was the vehicle fuel sales use started in 91 and subsequently became a legal non-conforming use with the remapping from the city. And the zoning conditions that we've offered today have tried to match the neighborhood mixed use future land use map designation as closely as possible. And I'll note that although staff has deemed this request inconsistent with the future land use map, Planning Commission has the right and the responsibility to make its own determination based on the conditions that we've offered. On the left-hand side are the use standards for vehicle fuel sales in a neighborhood mixed district if you're within 200 yards, or 200 feet, excuse me, of a residential district. And conditions 1 through 7 are on the right-hand side of the screen. All of those limited use standards in green are those that we've been able to incorporate into our rezoning application. So in the NX district, you can have up to 8 fuel pumps. We're requesting no more than 4. Our vacuuming and compression machines would be located at least 50 feet from a residential district with decibel levels. Accessory car washes must be fully automatic. Backlighting of fuel canopies is prohibited, and the canopy height is limited as well. The urban form map locates this property within a frequent transit area and some of a transit station area. And again, we've added conditions to try to recreate a frontage if and when this property is redeveloped for a use other than a convenience store and a gas station. The TOD would require an urban limited frontage for any new development here. The urban limited standards are in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there. And again, this condition would apply for any new development of, retail on the ground floor, apartments up top, solely apartments, but anything that's not gas station use. And again, that closely mirrors what the urban limited frontage would require. This is the proposed rendering of the improvements to Little Sioux Mini Mart. So everything looks essentially the same as it does today, albeit with new fuel pumps, a new fuel canopy to again kind of revitalize this convenience store and make sure that it endures for many more years. So again, Little Sioux requests this CX3 conditional use zoning to resume the vehicle fuel sales. 430 Buck Jones is at the southern tip of the Western Boulevard TOD. We have offered zoning conditions to create a conditional use district that is consistent with the neighborhood mixed use future land use map and the recommended urban frontage if this property is redeveloped. And for those reasons, the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment for those in opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table. Would anyone like to start off with questions or comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. For the applicant, why did you remove the condition on hours of service?
That was at the request of the applicant, I think to mirror the hours of operation for gas stations along Hillsborough and Western. It's my understanding that he says that they operate later than 11 p.m., so just trying to stay competitive and stay consistent with other gas stations. I believe those are about a mile north along Hillsborough and Western.
I certainly understand the request, but I think the context is different. This is really embedded in a neighborhood, and I think that 2 and 3 a.m. use could bring undesired usage patterns to that neighborhood. So I'd like some consideration to add that back in, perhaps.
Definitely, and if it's not 11 p.m. as a end time, is it, if there's a limitation at midnight or something, that we can just put some sort of parameters on the use itself.
I think I would be open to different options there, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I am conflicted with this case because on the one hand, I don't want to see the TOD limit a neighborhood business. On the other hand, it seems like everything about this is in direct contrast to the TOD. And the gas station hasn't operated since 2010. So I feel like I would feel it would be more compelling to me, I think, if it were putting a gas station out of business. But we're trying to revive something that hasn't been there for 14 years. That is contrary to what we're trying to do. So I'm struggling a little bit. So I'm just trying to listen to the conversation. I appreciate the conditions that have been added. I'm just struggling a little bit with this being the TOD and trying to support a neighborhood business at the same time.
Thank you.
I'd like to make the case for this rezoning. I am familiar with the spot, and I think the applicant is correct that it is a focal point for the community, and there's been all kinds of activity around that that's not just focused on cars coming out in and out for gas. And I remember when it did operate, that it was still operated as a focal point for the community. It's right on the very edge of the TOD. It's not located right on the corridor, like it's right on the boundary. I think that this will help this business survive. And I don't think that we would necessarily put it out of business by denying it, but we certainly increase its chances of sticking around a little longer in its current form if we give it the chance to expand its business. And I would, like, the concerns I had were about the unintended consequences if fuel sales didn't occur. But I like the conditions that have been put in for the frontage and the new building requirements, and I think that I would support this.
Thank you. If I can give a little context, at least some of the history behind the vehicle fuel sales use and of Little Sioux itself. So again, the convenience store aspect of this has been operating since '91. There's no indication that that would cease to operate absent, approval of the rezoning. When I talked to Mr. Samore early on, he said the reason for discontinuing the vehicle fuel cell use was, as sort of an independent retailer, it just became too much of a hassle for him to, make sure that everything was staying in compliance and the amount of maintenance that goes into operating a gas station. I believe in 2020, maybe late 2022, Davenport Energy, which is out of southeastern Virginia and is partnered with Valero, offered to come in, kind of restart the vehicle fuel sales use, update the pumps, the canopies, and the underground fuel tanks, and sort of assume that maintenance and licensing responsibility to take it off of Mark and his uncle. And so I think that that is a positive for them. And, you know, it's not like they stopped because they necessarily wanted to stop. It became just too much of a burden on their business itself. As Commissioner Otwell noted, there is a lot of activity that goes on at Little Sioux. I mean, but behind the blue tarp that you see there, you'll usually find fresh produce or fresh tortillas. And so it really is a focal point of the community, and we hope that the gas station sales will be a kind of a supportive feature of that to make sure that it continues as such. But if and when you know, Little Sioux outgrows this site and a new type of development comes in, we certainly want to be mindful of the fact that this is and maybe was in the future in the TOD, and have conditions in place that support a development that's consistent with what the city has for future development over here. This is still a fairly suburban, I would almost say rural, if you get down further along Bashford Road. And so although there are big plans for Western Boulevard, I'm not sure exactly, you know, how quickly you'll see this this area turn over with regard to the style of development. But hopefully that helped.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Haver.
Question for staff. In going through the proposed conditions, is it of the opinion of staff that those match closely enough so that if this property was redeveloped, they would be required to sort of lean back towards the frontage and the future land use map? Are there some additional conditions that staff feels would strengthen that should the site be redeveloped, or does staff feel like the applicant's done a fairly thorough job of putting those conditions in place?
They've been revised at least twice, if not 3 times. They do approximate a frontage for vehicle fuel sales, for buildings not intended for vehicle fuel sales. As far as the major differences for future land use between community mixed use and neighborhood mixed use, there are some different standards for, so just as an example, car washes are not permitted in NX, but are limited uses in CX. Vehicle fuel sales are limited in both NX and CX, and subject to having fuel islands 25 feet away from the right-of-way, and subject to NCDOT driveway standards. But NX standards for vehicle fuel sales are more restrictive than they are in CX. So a lot of those standards have been included in the conditions, but not all of them, including the limit on hours of operation, which Commissioner Otwell mentioned.
I guess question for the applicant, there's some conditions in there about a car wash, and staff just mentioned the difference there in the zonings. If the intent is to allow the mini Sioux to continue and to support its existence there, and the fuel sales as part of that, where's the car wash coming in?
Yeah, Commissioner O'Haver, I spoke with Mr. Burns and with Bynum about, you know, how we could potentially bring this into consistency with the neighborhood mixed-use future land use map designation. Car wash was specifically mentioned. We just hadn't added that to our list of conditions. I spoke with the applicant. There's no car wash on site today. There's no plans to incorporate one with the new fuel pumps and fuel canopy. We would be open to including that as a prohibited use, especially if that you know, kind of tilts the scale into a future land use map consistency along with the hours of operation condition.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would rely on staff decisions on that, but similar to the comments that have been made, I am a little conflicted removing the TOD. I agree it's on the edge. I lean a little bit more towards supporting local businesses, and if that's going to help them stick around, I can get behind that. If staff has said that the applicant has done a good job of matching the requirement, should it be redeveloped, and you consider the car wash, I think I could support this case.
Right, and aside from the hours of operation, the limited use standards that you see on the left-hand side, it was the reason that we initially went to CX in the first place. We just can't meet 100-foot minimum lot width on this site. I think it's only 80 feet wide. And it's too close to the Bashford and Buck Jones intersection to comply with the second standard. But I think, again, we can add that car wash prohibition, include in hours of operation, and get it as close as we possibly can to what would look like an X district.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other thoughts from the commission? Seeing none, it looks like we have, we'll be holding this at the table for the applicant to review and consider new conditions related to hours of operation. Are there any other comments and thoughts for the next meeting? And the car wash, excuse me, yes. Any other thoughts before the next meeting? Well, in that case, the next meeting is February 27th. To revise those conditions, they would need to be submitted by this Friday, February 16th. Would that provide the applicant enough time to make those changes? It would. Yes. Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, I would like to make a motion to defer this case to our February 27th Planning Commission regular meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner McCrimmon is seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks. Moving on to old business. We have 2 items on the agenda today. These requests have both appeared on our January 23rd agenda, but the first item was not discussed at that meeting due to timing constraints, so we will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation, and we will hear from the public. The second item was discussed at our December 23rd meeting, so we will focus today on any updates from that case. So moving on to the first item, D1, rezoning case Z5323 at Rock Quarry Road and Interlock Drive. This case is to change approximately 0.92 acres from R4 to R10. As described, this case appeared on our January 23rd Planning Commission agenda but was not discussed, and no changes have been made since that meeting. So we will now turn to Sarah Shaughnessy for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning. Yep, so this is a request to rezone a little less than an acre from R4 to R10 on Rock Quarry, the corner of Rock Quarry and Interlock Drive. Again, this case appeared on your last agenda but was not discussed, so I'm presenting the full case now. Your deadline for action is March 23rd. Zoning in the area is mostly residential. It's across from the Old Town development, which is R10 conditional use, and there is some zoning for neighborhood mixed use sort of southeast of the site, but most of the zoning in this area is R4. An aerial view of the site showing the commercial zoning and then residential surrounding. Some additional views of this site. It is, again, on the corner of Interlock and Rock Quarry Road, so you can see going along Rock Quarry Road looking west, and then on Interlock Drive looking north, a different view of the site. There is a shopping center with a Dollar General and a few other businesses just south of the site, as you can see in the bottom left, and then another view of the site, Rock Quarry looking east. There are no proposed conditions. It's a general use case. The change in entitlement from R4 to R10 would allow approximately 10 additional units to be built on the site, would allow some additional building types, and would change the frontages. This site, the census tract, has a lower walk score than average, a lower transit score than average, and a lower bike score than average. However, transportation costs are lower than the city as a whole, and it does have good job proximity. The site is served by Route 17, which provides service along Rock Quarry Road down to the shops at Battle Bridge. It does not include any subsidized units, but it would potentially add to the housing supply, permit a variety of housing types, allow smaller units, smaller lots, and is within walking distance of that transit line. This area census tract has a higher proportion of residents of color as well as low-income households. Rent is also increasing in this area faster than the citywide rate. The request is inconsistent with the future land use map designation of low-scale residential. It's along a transit emphasis corridor, but it is a residential district, so no urban frontage would be applied here. Again, inconsistent with the future land use map, but consistent with a comprehensive plan overall. A number of consistent policies reinforcing the urban pattern, neighborhood scale housing, as well as adding housing variety and housing supply. And then the inconsistent policies here, again, inconsistent with the future land use map. This site is outside of current fire service. I believe it's just out of the area of a ladder truck. So that is why the zoning and infrastructure impacts policy is cited here. A few outstanding issues, transportation staff noted the first two in the staff report. So there is a concern with access management along Rock Quarry Road. There are a lot of curb cuts, and so they recommended a zoning condition limiting access to Interlock Drive, which is currently how the development on the site is oriented, and that would minimize conflict between Rock Quarry Road and any cars leaving from the site. So that is a suggestion there. Just wanted to highlight that for you. And then there is limited street connectivity in the area. It's a fairly large block with lots of dead-end streets. So this is a single-family site that would likely be exempt from block perimeter standards. So also wanted to highlight that for you. And then again, the site is outside standard fire response times. Again, your deadline for action is March 23rd.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The reason I'm rezoning this piece of land is to provide affordable housing for the community. Small houses, 1,600 square feet. That's the whole plan for this land. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much. And would you mind introducing yourself as well?
My name is Mohammed with Crew Group.
Thank you very much. And are you the current property owner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we will move to public comment for those in opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And now seeing none, we will bring it back to the table for discussion. Any questions and comments from commissioners? Commissioner Fox.
I have a question for staff regarding the comment about safety and access management on Rock Quarry. What is allowed during the site plan review process to mitigate that? And it's an unusual request for this type of rezoning to have a condition related to access management. So I just wanted a little bit more detail.
Sure. I'm going to ask Margaret to come up and provide some context there.
Thank you.
Good morning, Margaret Totala, Transportation. So I'm trying to find the line between conjecture and what would be required, but essentially, keep in mind that Rock Quarry Road is NCDOT maintained, so there's also always a coordination piece that goes along with that. But the site is in a position where, in terms of like distance from the intersection and the driveway above it, there could be an option for a driveway out onto Rock Quarry Road. We would discourage that. But a way to ensure that would be to add a condition. And that has to do with Rock Quarry being, I think right now, 4-lane undivided. It's designated as a 4-lane divided road. There's a lot of development going on, especially across the street from this parcel. So the cross-section is changing. It's sort of a, in terms of ensuring that access and circulation makes sense, we would recommend that the only access be through Interlock Drive. And then from Interlock Drive, there's an actual intersection with Rock Quarry instead of a driveway.
Okay, so I guess to be more specific, the code is insufficient to require the access which you would like to see.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Is that a follow-up question from the applicant on that matter as well?
No follow-up question. I'll acknowledge it's a site that's less than an acre, and the intent is to do townhouses on it, as I understand, or smaller homes. And it's unusual to restrict access, just as precedent of other projects of similar scale. We have not restricted access in that manner. So I guess my question is really more of a conjecture about if the code is insufficient to mitigate for what type of access the city would like to see, then perhaps the code should be altered to achieve those goals.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett.
Following up on Commissioner Fox, if this were not added as a condition of the rezoning, is it something that might happen during site planning?
Yes, it's more of a uncertainty, right?
Okay.
So it could be handled at site review without a problem. It could not. And so it's just a consideration for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox.
I'd like to recommend approval of Z5323. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Otwell has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to our next item, item D2, rezoning case Z1823 at Wilson Street and Garner Road. This case is to change approximately 20.72 acres from R6 and R4, from R6 and R10 to RX4 with conditions. We first heard this case at our January 23rd meeting, and it was deferred to this meeting to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions. We have received those revised conditions, so we must vote on the case as it appears today. And we will now turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a presentation from city planning staff.
Thanks. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. So just a reminder, the request is to rezone from R10 and R6 to residential mixed use 4 stories with conditions. So the applicant has submitted some revised conditions. Signed conditions were provided last Friday by the deadline to be considered today. There were some changes made in response to staff comments, clerical corrections. But first change I want to point out for you is condition number 2. So a word has been added to that condition that clarifies that all principal uses will be prohibited other than those that are both permitted by RX and listed within the definition of household living uses. So that kind of opens up the ability for accessory commercial uses like a home occupation kind of situation. The next change is going to be the addition of condition number 3. This limits all uses and kind of building types to single unit living in detached houses east of the stream. The stream is referenced a little bit differently here. So I will come to this screen. So that first condition that you all might remember from the last time, it is referencing the stream in this way to limit everything east of that for this particular site, 800 Wilson Street, to residential living uses. And then the new condition is saying everything east of this particular line. Those are going to be limited to single-family detached houses only, or any other uses that might be required, tree conservation, vehicular connectivity, things of that nature would still be permitted within that area. So that's an overview of those new conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions for staff before you start discussing.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, moving back. We have already received public comment on this case, so just so I can get a sense by show of hands, is there anyone here today who wished to speak on any of the proposed changes or any aspect of this case that was not previously discussed? Seeing none, I will bring this back to the table for questions and comments from the commissioners. And seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll do it because I think I brought up the concern about the adjacency there. So I'd like to thank the applicant for taking a look at that. I think that's a good compromise for my concerns. I think there might have been some other concerns up here. So in that light, I would like to move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of zoning amendment Z18, 2023.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Otwell has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes unanimously 7-0. And now moving on to new business. There are 6 items on new business today. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, so we will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation, and we will hear from the public. Moving to our first item, E2, is the Streetscape Amendment, or Streetscape Plan Amendment 123 with the Village District Common Sign Plan Amendment. This request is to change the Village District Common Signage Plan adopted in 2003. And we will now turn to Danya Sandeep for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. Danya Sandeep with Planning and Development. So this item, SSP 123, is a streetscape plan amendment requesting changes to the common signage plan of the Village District Shopping Center. So we have not actually received one of these requests since the adoption of the UDO in 2013. So I'm going to give a quick overview of streetscape plans as general background information. So streetscape and parking plans were a required component of the legacy rezoning process that was associated with the pedestrian business overlay district. Now, these plans were adopted by council in conjunction with PBOD rezoning, and they allowed for prescriptive treatment of both roadway and streetscape improvements within a defined area. So the plan allowed for variation from the development code, especially to provide and promote unified development and to create a unique character and identity for the subject area. Again, the intent is to allow and promote and enhance a pedestrian environment. So the typical elements that are usually included in a streetscape are sidewalk paving materials, landscaping, streetscape furnishings, and signage. We have a total of 19 adopted plans that are referenced both in the UDO and the City of Raleigh's Street Design Manual. Of the 19, we have only 2 plans that have signage regulations. So the process to amend a streetscape plan is, as prescribed by the UDO, is very similar to the rezoning process. So we do have a requirement for a neighborhood meeting, again, staff review and analysis, Planning Commission review and recommendation, official public hearing, and final action by City Council. So SSP 123 is an amendment requesting changes to the Cameron Village Streetscape Plan, which was adopted in 1990. The plan was again revised in 2003 to include a common signage plan. It was once again revised in 2008. The site is a 28.5-acre shopping center located along Oberlin Road between Clark Avenue and Smallwood Drive. The current zoning of the property is commercial mixed use with a 5 to 7 story height limit and also open frontages of UG and UL. So a little context, so the shopping center has a unique historical identity. It is considered one of the very first shopping centers in North Carolina and also potentially in Southeast region. So it opened doors in 1949 and has been in operation since then. The streetscape plan was adopted in 1990. The center also represents the post-World War development pattern, which had huge reliance on automobiles and reflects the suburban growth pattern of that era. This is a snapshot of the illustration from the 2003 plan, streetscape plan. The existing conditions show that the conditions are very suburban still. We have a lot of safe parking and separated buildings. So essentially the signage and wayfinding would have huge impact and would be critical for navigation of the site for both pedestrians and motorists. These are some images of the signage at the shopping center that exists today. You can see some track signs as well as projecting signs. So getting into the specifics of the proposed amendment. So first, they are looking to rename the common signage plan to the Village District Common Signage Plan, again, to reflect the current nomenclature of the shopping center. They want to bring some of the sign standards up to the current UDO standards. The amendments are also looking to add additional colors, additional materials, trademark logos, and additional sign types. Overall, all of these allowances would provide the tenants with more opportunities to upgrade their signage and reflect the village district's mid-century modern architectural style. So look into the proposed sign types. We have, they are proposing to update the sign regulations and bring it up to the UDO standards for the following 4 categories: projecting signs, window signs, A-frame, and changeable copy signs. They're seeking variation from the UDO for 4 categories: tract ID, low profile ground, wall signs, and awnings, gallery, and marquee. And I'll go into a little bit detail in there. In addition, they're also asking for internally illuminated box signs to allow for tenant logos. So a little deeper look into the variation requested. For both low profile ground as well as tract ID, they are proposing to allow those. Currently, the UDO allows these 2 sign categories only in the parking limited frontage. In addition, the applicant is also wanting to allow low profile signage only for tenants that have at least a minimum of 75,000 square foot. With wall signs, they are looking for additional allowances to allow for all of the stories, including basement and the second story. And there will be a max of 300 square foot each for the sign area. They also want to allow for internally illuminated box letter signs for tenant logos that would have a max letter height of 2 feet. The current UDO regulations are a little different. They do allow for a max of 2 square foot per linear foot of frontage, so there's no distinction between the stories. The same criteria applies to the awning, gallery, and marquee sign, but the only difference here is that the UDO does have a max letter height for the box letter, which is at 18-inch. So the proposed sign materials pretty much is straightforward. They do want to include exposed neon tubes with green, red, and blue colors potentially, and include also bare metal finished metals. Again, a note that the UDO does not regulate materials. This is something they want to include to create the unique environment that the shopping center maintains. They are seeking to bring the sign colors up to the UDO regulations because what is existing in the current streetscape plan is a lot more restrictive. So the request is consistent with a few policies. Again, the intent here is to create attractive facades and to enhance the pedestrian wayfinding opportunities for someone visiting the shopping center. There is already a set of unique character and historical identity that this shopping center has, and all of these amendments would help them continue to maintain that. Just want to note that a consistency consistency statement is required. It was a last minute determination, so we have distributed the forms. I think you should have a copy of that. There are no outstanding issues that staff has identified at this time. And again, we have had multiple trades review this. That's all I have. Any questions? I know the applicant's also here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate this. Moving on to public comment. For those in support, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair, Planning Commission. My name is Jennifer Ashton. I'm from Longleaf Law Partners. I'm a land use attorney, and I'm here today on behalf of the property owner for the Village District. As Danya said, we are here this morning to ask for an amendment to a very old common signage plan. The common signage plan was adopted back in 2003 and has not been updated since that time. As you may have got from Danya's presentation, our common signage plan that we did have for Village District is a lot more restrictive than what the current UDO allows. And for our shopping center to stay competitive in the market and to attract those high-end clients, high-end tenants that we really want to have, we do need to be competitive with sign type allowances and color allowances and material allowances. Another big thing that I'll hit on here as well is we are trying to go back to our mid-century modern roots. As you all have probably visited Village District over the years, you'll know that the tract ID signs have that very distinct cursive style to them. We're looking to return more to a mid-century modern aesthetic. So none of this today, though, is designed to force existing tenants to change their signage. This is really just to give more options and over time move towards more of that mid-century modern aesthetic. So with that being said, I'll kind of jump into, let's see, why is that not working? Oh, goodness, hold on. Okay, I'll just scroll. Okay, so as Danya mentioned, we do have CX zoning throughout these properties, and there are assigned urban frontages. This is important when we are discussing the tract ID and low profile signs that we are looking to. The tract ID will be remaining, those are existing, but low profile we're asking for an allowance there. Just by way of history, I do want to point out that pre the city remapping in 2014, Village District was zoned shopping center, and it was zoned with that pedestrian business overlay district that did allow for tract ID signs and for low profile ground signs. And if you look at the built environment out there, it is very much a shopping center. There are these large swaths of parking. So as Danya mentioned, wayfinding signs are incredibly important to this center. And then when the city remapping happened in 2014, an urban frontage was assigned to this site, but it really does not match the built environment. Existing conditions, you all are probably familiar with this. We do have a lot of streets running through this site. We've got Smallwood Drive, Cameron Street, Clark Avenue, and Woodburn Road. I won't go through these slides again, other than to highlight what we're talking about when we say mid-century modern signage. If you take a look at some of these old photographs, you'll notice the letters are very simplistic. We have a lot of clean lines on the signs, and the letters are spaced a little bit farther apart than what you would see probably in modern signage. What's interesting is these signs in their form are very simplistic, but the colors were very bright. They had aqua and reds and blues. So again, we're trying to return to that mid-century modern style with our signage in the future. Just some more examples here of some of the old photos, which are fun to look at. As Tanya mentioned, this is an image from our 2003 common signage plan. Again, just highlighting kind of that cursive style. This has not been updated since 2003. Some challenges that we have faced specifically in recent years in trying to attract tenants. The limitation on colors. Under our current signage plan, we're only allowed 4 colors. We're allowed black, white, red, and blue. You'd be surprised how many national brand tenants want to come in and have their own signage, and the color yellow has been a huge topic of conversation of late. So again, we're trying to allow the same number of colors that are authorized under the UDO today, just to give our tenants those options and to really attract those high-end tenants that we want at the center. Another really big thing that's come into play recently, we are trying to reactivate the basement level spaces at Village District. For those of you that know the history, there are a lot of basement spaces down there. The Raleigh Underground was there a long time ago. And Goodnights has just recently located to, not recently, but they're in one of the basement spaces. But under the UDO today, there's no distinction between levels, stories in a building. It's just 2 square feet of sign per linear foot of frontage. So there's no ability for those basement tenants to actually have signage at the ground level. So this amendment here today is asking for that consideration. All right, let me get into tracked ID signs and low profile signs. So track signs, we already currently have 8 tracked ID signs in Village District. Those were permitted under the streetscape plan prior to the 2014 city remapping. So we're just asking for those to be able to stay. They are pre-existing, and the existing streetscape plan from 2003 does allow them. We're also asking to add low profile ground signs for tenants that have ground leases of at least 75,000 square feet. I just want to highlight here, again, wayfinding is so important at this center, but we are not looking to have a proliferation of ground signs, so we are limiting it to those tenants that have very large ground leases. And at this time, there probably is only going to be one tenant that meets that, and that's going to be the new Oberlin Hotel. This slide here highlights for you what I was talking about earlier with the basement tenant signage. I'm giving basement tenants this opportunity to advertise at ground level. Just by way of showing you a diagram of this, we've got a new projecting sign that is not currently allowed under the streetscape plan. We have that internally illuminated box sign, and then we also have these marquee gallery signs. And this signage is specifically showing you what Goodnights would like to have. And again, it's kind of returning to that old classic, mid-century modern 1950s style, which is fun. We're also asking for some limited changeable copy signs, again, with these marquees for these entertainment venues. And the frequency that those signs can be changed out is in accordance with the UDO today. So no more than 4 times per day, but we don't anticipate it changing that much. And again, just kind of showing this mid-century modern style with the neon tubes, the brighter color signage, the reds, the blues, the greens, and having kind of more options for materials to be used for the signage. Again, just showing you the colors that we currently have versus we would like to go to the UDO allowance of up to 7 colors per sign. And with that, I am happy to take any questions. I know this is a unique application. You don't see these often. We don't know of one that's come before you all for years. So again, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for those in support. Oh, I'm sorry, we already had that. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we can move to public comment for those in opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table for questions and comments from any of our commissioners. Commissioner Fox.
This seems pretty straightforward, and I'm ready to support it when the rest of the commission is.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, Commissioner Haber?
I agree. I was trying to go back through Danya's presentation and the actual conditions. In Danya's presentation, it said you're limiting neon to green, red, and blue. I wouldn't limit it to that. If that was actually the case, I'm open to opening that up. I'd like to see that taken out of there, quite frankly.
The way it's worded in the streetscape plan is green, red, blue, or other colors approved by the landlord. So giving Regency Centers, the landlord of Village District, the option to allow for more, just knowing we do have that 7 color limitation under the UDO.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Otwell.
I plan to support it too, but I think it's really cool to allow neon back in these signs. When these streetscape sign plans were first drafted, there were several hundred neon workshops across the state, and now there's like 2, since it's all LED now, and one of them is in the loading dock And so there's a very good chance for some like local artwork to show up in those signs. So I think it's pretty exciting.
Nice. Any other thoughts? Then I will entertain a motion. Yes, Mr. Fox.
I would like to recommend approval of SSP 01-2023. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13, 2024, contained in the supplemental agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the streetscape plan amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Haver is seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item E2, text change, or TC 823. This is a text change to change the name of the Appearance Commission to the Design Review Commission. And we will turn to Keegan McDonald for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, everyone. Keegan McDonald. I'm with Planning and Development. So today I'm going to be presenting on TC 823. This is a name change for what is currently called the Appearance Commission. So as some of you may be aware, Appearance Commission duties and the creation of that body is prescribed under state law. And this is just an excerpt that I think encapsulates sort of their role within the city. Here it states to provide leadership and guidance in matters of area or community design and appearance to individuals and to public and private organizations and agencies. So they have a fairly expansive portfolio today. They work on legacy projects throughout the year to create kind of aesthetic value and imprint their design expertise on the community. They also occasionally review text changes and provide guidance on those documents. They arrange and award awards for the Sir Walter Raleigh award ceremony that takes place annually, and that awards good design throughout the community. But really their principal function over the past several years has been focused on design alternates. So design alternates are very similar to variances, if you're familiar with those. Basically an alternative method of compliance for various design and transportation related standards within the UDO. So that definitely takes up the bulk of their work. And as such, they've had many ongoing discussions over the past several years about how they can really maintain the other parts of their portfolio, but also better portray to the public and particularly applicants this primary function of theirs. And so they went through a process internally to discuss a potential name change just to improve that understanding of the community. And what they've arrived at is the Design Review Commission as their new name. And in the staff report, there's a list of some of the other names that they considered, but ultimately felt this, again, best encapsulate that primary function. The only other thing that staff just wants to note for your awareness is that this name change in no way changes how they're viewed under state law. They would still be considered an Appearance Commission and would have all of the same powers that they do today. So it's really just a title change for Raleigh specifically, and there actually are some other jurisdictions around the state who have chosen to prescribe their Appearance Commission a different name. So that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. As the city is the applicant, we will now just open up public comment to those in support. Those in support of this project have a total of 10 minutes to speak, or in support of this change, excuse me. And seeing none, we'll open public comment for any opposed. Those opposed to this change have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table for discussion. Any questions and comments from our commissioners? Seeing none, oh, perhaps? Like to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion. And I sat on the Appearance Commission for 6 years and chaired it for 2.5. And we have been having these conversations. That body has been having these conversations for quite a while, so I'm glad to see this come forward. I would like to get into the record, as there was an exercise that took place through the Appearance Commission that suggested to City Council that their jurisdiction increase a little bit to actually provide some design review for specific projects coming forward. Still, just as a recommended body, you can't require it to happen. We spent a lot of time looking at where significant public dollars have been invested, and we were very strategic about those areas of town, the city, where we felt like an additional design review for projects coming forward would be appropriate. Staff did a great job back then providing a number of precedents in similar-sized cities that have similar review boards and similar responsibilities. So I think it's great. I would like just to remind City Council that maybe they go back and find that original recommendation. I think at the rate at which our city is growing, the amount of new buildings that are coming forward, me personally, I'd like to see in certain areas the architecture and the design considerations beyond architecture, the public realm, all of those things elevate to start to speak to where we are going as a city. And so I'd like to encourage City Council to dig back a few years and find that original recommendation. When we presented it to council back at the time, of course, it went into committee at City Council, and it came out 6 months later completely different than the way it went in, and it was never approved. And so I just would like council to pull out the initial recommendation prior to it going to committee at City Council. So all that being said, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment TC 823.
Thank you. In your motion, would you like to include a recommendation about that past work as well? Or do you just want to say it on the record today?
I wanted to be on the record. I think it warrants our current city council taking a look at that and looking at some of the considerations. I thought it was a really, really good and thoughtful consideration, move the city forward in, again, looking at public realm and design standards and elevating where we're going as a city.
Did you state the year in which that recommendation was set for?
I can't remember what I did yesterday, much less 8 years ago.
16,
so
maybe 2016.
I don't remember.
I was still there. 'Cause
I
wrote
tried.
it.
Yeah, I tried pulling it up, but like on my hard drive. But I have no idea. I'd love to see it though. If you find it, if you could send it back to me so I could reference it. Would be
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that, on Commissioner Haver's recommendation and insight into that previous work. I actually was involved with the Appearance Commission for a short time while we were transitioning to a new staff member, and that was a few years ago. And I know that was actually part of their annual report, was finding ways to provide earlier guidance for development projects. I know one of the principal challenges that has come up with that, with playing that role, is that any guidance provided therein to a project early on would potentially compromise the ability of those who participated in overseeing or approving any future design alternates. And so then that creates sort of this bifurcation of the commission in their work, because the design alternate process is a QJ decision and there has to be no kind of prior insight or communication before that. And I think at the time there were some challenges with quorum and getting kind of, even at that time, full participation from the commission. And so it felt like sort of a heavy lift. But I do know it's definitely on their radar, because they've all expressed interest in trying to figure out ways that they can imprint their perspective and kind of work towards better design outside of the formal design alternate process, because that's, of course, very narrow. So just wanted to say, I know that's definitely top of mind for them.
And you are, as usual, you're absolutely right. Thank you. It was not a QJ process at the time, so maybe there's some additional complications that have come forward since that change. But I still think it's worthwhile to pull that up and take a look at it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a motion on the table to approve this case and adopt the consistency statement as provided in the agenda materials. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fox is seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to item E3, rezoning case Z5423 at South Saunders Street. This case is to change approximately 0.36 acres from neighborhood mixed use 3 stories UL with TOD to residential mixed use 7 stories conditional use UL with TOD. We will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning again. Matthew Burns, Planning and Development. This request would increase the max allowable height from 3 to 7 stories, which would allow for increased density of standalone residential uses and residential in combination with retail and/or office. And your deadline for action is April 13th. Zoning in the area is predominantly residential and mixed use. Both parcels were most recently rezoned in 2022 as part of a city-initiated rezoning to apply a TOD, Z18 2022, which I mentioned in the last case. And the request is also adjacent to a recently approved case, Z4 2022, which rezoned a larger site to a combination of zoning districts, but this site is contiguous to a portion that was rezoned to RX7 UL CU. Nearby land uses are predominantly moderate and medium scale residential, commercial, and also some industrial uses. And the site is very close to Dorothea Dix. One of the parcels that make up this request is vacant. The other is the site of the Raleigh Architecture Company. And other nearby businesses include the Vault Craft Beer. The area that's labeled retail shops used to be Bolted Bread and Night Rider. As far as nearby residential uses, you have Lambert Development to the northeast, Dorothea Commons to the southwest, and Heritage Park to the east. Here are some views along South Saunders, where you can see the Raleigh Architecture Building. And the request would, proposed conditions would prohibit some uses that are normally permitted in RX. The request would increase the maximum number of residential units, and the reduction in max gross office and the increase in max gross retail square footage is due to the TOD having the UDO having standards for residential mixed use under the TOD. This area has a higher walk score, higher transit score, higher bike score, lower transportation costs, and much higher job proximity than average. And it's served by Raleigh routes 21, and it's also very close to Route 11. Specifically, Route 11 is planned for an increased service frequency by FY28 from 30-minute to 15-minute service. The site's also about 500 feet from a proposed BRT station along the western corridor. The request would add to the housing supply. It does not include subsidized units, permits a variety of housing types, smaller units, and is within walking distance of transit. Area residents are less likely to be racial minorities and less likely to be low income than the city average. And the cost of rent has increased by about 50% since 2016, which is higher than the city average. The request is consistent with neighborhood mixed use, which recommends NX as the most appropriate corresponding zoning district. Compared to NX, the requested RX district permits a similar variety of residential uses and a narrower range of commercial uses. The site is within an emerging urban center per table LU2, which recommends heights up to 12 stories, and including UL frontage in this area per the urban form map is consistent with its designation as downtown and a frequent transit area. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use map, and urban form map. And it's consistent with several policies related to transit access, transit stations, station area land uses, as well as the recommended heights that I mentioned. It is also consistent with two policies specific to the Downtown West Small Area Plan. And it's inconsistent with some policies related to compatibility of infill development and the urban pattern, since most of the surrounding districts are limited to 3 stories currently. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline is April 13th. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment. For those in support, the applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the Planning Commission. Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant as well as the contract purchaser, Blue Heron. With me today is Jaron Joyner with Blue Heron. This is, Matt did a good job of describing the request for rezoning. It really is done to facilitate basically a consistent development with the property to the north, which is 601 West South Street. It is currently 7 stories and has, although it was part of a larger rezoning done a few years ago, it had the 601 West South Street property with 7 stories had relatively few zoning conditions on it. Most of the zoning conditions relate to the property at 611 West South Street, which is which abuts I believe it's the Dorothea Drive neighborhood there, those sort of narrow houses, as well as is on the other side of a greenway easement. And so we have proposed it. The one thing we didn't include, just in case you're wondering, is a specific height limit. The reason we didn't do that, beyond the 7 stories, there is a zoning condition on the 601 North site. So this is the 601 North site. And what we're proposing is basically to make them match. The 601 North site has a provision that says height shall be no more than 85 feet on the buildings. We did not add that onto these 2 parcels here because they are downhill from 601 North. And so, frankly, we started trying to go through the brain damage of how exactly would you measure that? Would you need to tweak that provision for, if you did a joint development or not? How would you do that? And we just said majority of the frontage, the taller frontage, is going to be there. So to the extent we're doing this rezoning to facilitate a joint development, we just opted not to include it. Happy to answer any questions, but I don't think we have a lot else to say about it. It's consistent, next to the future BRT line, right next to a station. So a good ideal site. And although a lot of the surrounding properties are not currently limited in height, as Matthew said, I would expect that a number of the sites, I think both the Housing Authority site just across the street to the east, you're likely going to see some additional changes there. Both on the future land use map calls for that, and I think that's sort of been in the works for a while. So,
Thank you very much. Continuing public comment, those in favor, are there any more members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this project? Seeing none, moving on to public comment for any opposed. Those opposed to this case have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Would anyone like to kick us off? Commissioner Bennett.
Question for staff. The rezoning to the north that this one seeks to be consistent with, when that one was rezoned, was it in the TOD?
So I spoke to Ira Mabel, the case planner for that, and the original request for that adjacent rezoning didn't include the TOD, but since both cases were active at the same time, after their second neighborhood meeting, they added the TOD to their request since they weren't sure if the TOD would be approved before the rezoning would. So, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm asking because the question that I'm about to ask just in case anyone says, why didn't you ask that then? I was like trying to make sure, and it may be something that I just overlooked if it were in the TOD, but here's my question. At what height could they go to if they took advantage of the density bonus?
So, let me pull up the table. So currently, under NX3 UL, with the TOD, they could get a bonus of up to four, they could go from up to 4 stories with the TOD. Under the proposed zoning, they could go up to 12.
Okay.
Can I ask, couldn't they go up to 5 if it's 3?
Yes, it rounds up. So for the non-residential bonus, it would be a 30% bonus. So 3-story height limit would go to 4 stories. But for the affordable housing bonus, it'd be 5 stories.
It would be 5.
Under current zoning.
Okay. So I understand that doesn't give them the 7 that they want. I have to note, however, this is something we've talked about at the table, that you can rezone around using the density bonus. So I just want to underscore, when I say I'm concerned that the density bonus is not having the effect that we want it to, this is one of the reasons why, because you can rezone for height and not use the density bonus. So you've answered that part of my question. The other thing I want to say to you, Matthew, is I was reading through the staff report. I pay a lot of attention to the analysis questions, as everyone knows. And the answer to number 4 was excellent. I mean, thank you. I really, and it's not necessarily relevant to this specific rezoning, but this is why early in my tenure on the Planning Commission, we talked about having these types of discussions around rezonings, because it really is important to understand the history of why an area looks like it does and has developed like it does and has the demographics that it does, and why the decisions that we continue to make are relevant. And when I read it, I highlighted it, I called people about it. This is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about planning for equity and making sure we're integrating equity in everything we do. So I just really want to thank you and applaud you for how you, I'm assuming it was you, it may have been a collective effort, how you and staff answered that question.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. I did not see a public engagement report on this topic. I know that when the property to the north was being rezoned, a lot of the, I recall a lot of the concerns on the height limit were related to the Dorothea Commons neighborhood to the south, that project immediately abutted. So we did have public comment, and I know that a lot of the conditions added there were related to that neighborhood. Did we have any public outreach on this case related to height?
So there were a couple of neighbors in attendance at the second neighborhood meeting who were concerned about construction noise, less concerned about height, but they did ask about it. But we got a few views on the public input site, but I don't believe anyone commented on it.
Okay, thank you. That's consistent with my recollection of which neighbors were concerned about the case to the north as well.
Yeah, I just want to echo a little bit of what Commissioner Bennett said, but I also have the same concerns about the rules of the TOD's density bonus kind of being undermined and disincentivized by giving this more height than what currently sits there. Also want to point out, I think Heritage Park right across South Street there is going to be redeveloped pretty soon, I believe. And I think it's currently almost all 30% AMI housing, if I'm not mistaken, but I think it's going to be redeveloped at a mix, which I think makes some on-site affordable housing at this corner even more important. Because the incomes and some of the people who live in Heritage Park are going to be displaced in the future. If it's redeveloped, I think that's inevitable, and it's going to be higher incomes placed there. So I think having as much incentive as we can to have affordable housing in that area, and the market redevelopment around it is super vital. And also thank you for I also love the answer to number 4 as well. And throughout this report with regard to the density bonus where you mentioned too. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Haber?
Yep. To be consistent, I have a question for the applicant. I do remember when the rezoning took place to the north, there were some concerns about height. I understand those are long, narrow lots, and the principal uses are generally developed to the south. But again, in an effort to be consistent, my concern is if they did take advantage of the density bonus, which it sounds like this particular applicant is not, it could go to 12 stories adjacent to existing residential parcels in town. And I understand there's a lot of friction between that, but I feel like there's an opportunity to provide a condition to limit the heights of buildings that are directly adjacent to existing single-family homes within these urban areas. I understand that in the staff report, there are some transition yards that are required, although it's limited. I know that at 12 stories, I believe there's a step back that's required, which I think is pretty minimal in my personal opinion of affecting the scale of a building. And so my question to the applicant is, would there be a consideration to look at limiting the height of the proposed building along that, I guess for this particular case, western boundary line?
Absolutely, we could take a look at that. It may be a little bit taller than the 85 feet, just for the reasons I outlined, that to the extent that we're making sure that we have a consistent building. We don't want to get in the way of topo. I think, just so you know, because I think you're asking in general without the condition that you limit height, immediately adjacent to existing single-family homes. Both this lot and this lot are currently vacant. So, and I think this lot is largely subject to I think entirely subject to a greenway easement from the city. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to, I think this is an important issue that I've brought up on every case, so I want to be consistent. I understand that here, the possibility that condition arises is limited, but I just want it to be taken under consideration, fully realizing that sometimes asking that creates construction costs to go up and all those things. So I'm not unaware of some of the complications by asking what I'm asking, but I do feel like in these urban areas where I understand there was a lot of discussion on the rezoning to the north from those neighbors. I talked to a handful of them, and I understand their concerns in these particular situations.
We do too, and obviously one of the benefits is that one of these parcels is basically within the square of the existing rezoning, but obviously this one is not, and so we're happy to take a look at that. Again, I just want to telegraph in advance just to make sure that if anybody has any heartburn about it, I would expect that we would come in with something above 85 feet just because of topography. Again, because it's falling down to Dix Park as you go south on South Saunders. And so just to try to avoid any brain damage once you get to site plan, we would probably ask for a little bit taller height limit there. I'm not seeing any concerns, but if there is any, I wanted to telegraph that.
Thank you. And just to clarify for next time, Commissioner Haver, you're interested in seeing the west side of the southern parcel to be limited with respect to the potential 12 stories under the TOD. Is that correct, since it's proximate to, I guess it's zoned single-family residential, but it's vacant and has a greenway easement, so it can't be constructed. Just trying to figure out exactly
Correct.
what you're looking for. Okay.
And I think just in full transparency, and I know this, we've got minutes, et cetera. I think sometimes my requests are, I want to be sensitive to what I'm asking, but I also want applicants coming forward asking to upzone their property to take some time and think about what is going on in the surrounding areas. And maybe this isn't a situation where that makes sense. I'm just asking the applicant to take a look at it, be considerate to what's going on around them. And so I think my fellow commissioners have seen sometimes I ask for an applicant to look at adding a condition. They come back and they say they can't do it, and I say, thank you, I'm willing to recommend approval. So,
The Chair Miller and Commissioner O'Haver, what I think we'd be looking at is under the current zoning for 601 West South Street, which again is this parcel right here. It says, any development on 601 West South Street shall be limited in height to 85 feet. And so I think what we would be looking at is language, if, as we consider that, that would be the sort of language we'd be looking at that's sort of consistent with that sort of language. So again, just to telegraph what we will be evaluating and making sure that I'm not getting it wrong. So.
Thank you. That seems sufficient. Any other comments from the commissioners? Nope. Water bottle grab. Not a mic grab. Any other items? Seeing none, it sounds like we're going to hold this one to a future meeting to allow the applicant time to provide, to consider providing additional conditions related to height. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, February 27th. In order to be on that agenda, you'd have to submit new conditions by this Friday. Is that enough time?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Should be
you.
enough time.
Then, I believe we need to make motions for these, right? Okay, so then I would like to make a motion to move this case to our next Planning Commission regular meeting on February 27th. Do I have a second? Commissioner Fox has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Okay. Moving on to item E4, rezoning case Z5723 at Spring Forest Road and Atlantic Avenue. This case is to change approximately 3.44 acres from CX3CU to CX3 parking limited, CX3CU and CX3 parking limited CU to CX3CU with no frontage. We will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yep, that's the background of the request. Z57 is to rezone from CX3 CU and 3X3 PLCU to CX3 CU. And your deadline for action is April 13th. Zoning the area is predominantly mixed use and residential. There are nearby parcels that are zoned CX3 with different types of frontages, as well as some with conditions. There is a significant commercial development on and surrounding the site, as well as some office uses across Spring Forest Road. The site's also near moderate and medium-scale residential uses, as well as Millbrook Magnet High School and the Exchange Park. And there are some industrial uses south and east of the site near Departure Drive and Discovery Drive. Some nearby businesses include there's a DMV at the Pavilion Shopping Center. There are several gas stations such as a BP and a Sheetz. There is a Waffle House, a car wash, etc. Here are some views of the site along Spring Forest and Atlantic Avenue. You can see one of the existing buildings on site, which is about 8,000 square feet, and it has a tobacco shop, I believe a pizza shop, and a couple other businesses. There is also about a 4,000 square foot building right there at the corner that I believe is I don't know if it's currently occupied, but it has been built. So proposed conditions would limit many uses that are normally permitted in CX, most notably, in this case, all residential land uses and most civic land uses. The request would also prohibit on-site parking between the buildings closest to Spring Forest Road and Atlantic Avenue, respectively. Low and medium profile ground signs would be permitted with the request, but high profile ground signs would be prohibited. And finally, the request would limit office uses to 82,000 square feet and the combined area for personal service, restaurant and bar, shopping center, and retail sales to 43,000 square feet. So approval would significantly increase entitlement across commercial uses. The build-to requirements would stay the same, and note that residential units would not be permitted based on the proposed zoning conditions, which explains the reduction in the max number of residential units. The site has a higher walk score, higher bike score, lower transportation costs, and much higher job proximity than average, and has an average transit score. The site is served by Go Raleigh Route 25L, the Triangle Town Link, which connects Falls Point Shopping Center with Wake Med and Triangle Town Center. The request would subtract from the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, does not permit a variety of housing types, and would not allow smaller units. It is within walking distance of transit, and again, all residential land uses would be prohibited. Area residents are slightly less likely to be racial minorities and less likely to be low income compared to the city average, and the cost of rent nearby is increased by 23%, which is slightly lower than the city average. The request is consistent with the future land use map, and there is no urban form guidance for this site. Overall, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, and it's consistent with many policies concerning commercial nodes and development in those nodes. And staff did not identify any policies inconsistent with the request. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is April 13th. Let me know if you have any questions before opening discussion.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant and landowners. Here on behalf of the landowners with me today is Young Lin. So this, long and short of this one, as you may have realized, here's an updated picture, by the way, of the site with the new Dunkin' Donuts going in. Long and short of it is that the current cap, Mr. Lin has determined that the current cap of 20,000 square feet of retail is a little bit below what he'd like. Here's sort of the plans for the site. You've got the two existing buildings, this one here. This one isn't shown, but that's the Dunkin' Donuts building, which amount to about roughly 11,700 square feet of retail space. He's really only thinking, this is the site of the future building, and what he's thinking is somewhere between 8,000 and 15,000 square feet. When he called me initially, I normally wouldn't go through this, but I think this provides good context. When he called me initially, he said, I want to do a text change amendment for about 3,000 square feet to add, to 23,000 square feet of retail. And the history on this rezoning is we've already gone through this. This is the third time we've gone through this. So in 2014, it was rezoned to allow 14,900 square feet of retail. Then it was upped in 2020 to 20,000 square feet. So as I put on there, the goal here is, I went to staff and I said, why does the cap exist? And there's nothing in the prior reports that say there's a big concern about this. So basically, the proposal that we have here was the max amount you can do before triggering a TIA. So just to give you all the background on that. And the goal is, so you won't see us come back again on this one. In terms of the zoning conditions that are proposed, so two things. We didn't do a text change amendment, in case you were wondering, because there was a recombination after the 2020 rezoning. A small piece of land right here was recombined from the property to the north. So we couldn't do a text change because that property to the north had slightly different zoning on it. In terms of the zoning conditions, the prior zoning conditions, we largely stayed with those except for changes in the caps on retail uses. There was a provision requiring 2 transit easements to be dedicated. That's been done, so we did remove that. And we kept, parking sort of the frontage like conditions. Our understanding is that the existing conditions do not allow residential, because what they say is that it's sort of a 2-step process, and I apologize for not noticing that in the staff report and confabbing with Matthew prior to this meeting. But our understanding is that what it says is, development on the site is limited to a certain amount of square footage of commercial and retail uses, and then there's a separate condition that says here are the commercial and retail uses that are permitted. Again, I asked Mr. York to take a look at it just to check and get his take, but that I just wanted to let you all know that we weren't. Our understanding was it already wasn't allowed, which is why we did not. We were trying not to change anything except the retail cap. And that's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much.
And I would just add that's a reading. I mean, technically the city attorney's office doesn't interpret the zoning ordinances, but it does say the current condition, number 1, after describing the commercial and referencing condition 4 that goes into more detail on the commercial, says no other uses shall be permitted on the rezoned land. So.
Thank you very much. Continuing with public comment for those in support. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll turn to public comment for those in any opposed. Any opposition to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table for questions. Commissioner Fox.
Question of the applicant. Can you provide a little bit more detail of the request to remove the parking limited?
I don't believe there's current parking limited zoning. Oh, yeah, okay.
It's just on an adjacent?
Yeah, it was, so I apologize, yes. So that property that was added in, which is basically the driveway here, or is the portion that had parking limited on it. So the rest of the property does not currently have parking limited on it and was subject to the existing sort of parking limited-like conditions that were existing. So rather than, frankly, so what our decision was is take the existing conditions for the majority of the land, which had some frontage concepts, and use those rather than trying to sort of figure out, frankly, if the existing buildings are fully compliant with parking limited requirements, et cetera, et cetera.
And to clarify too, the no portion of the site outlined in yellow there has urban form guidance. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I think that's what the staff report said as well.
I see nodding. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Other questions from commissioners? Nope. Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Regarding case Z 5723, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner McCrimmett has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. On to item E5, rezoning case Z5823 at Rawls Drive. This case is to change approximately 3.03 acres from R6 and R10 CU entirely to R10 CU. We will now turn to Sarah Shaughnessy for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning again. So yeah, this is a request to rezone 4 parcels, about 3 acres, from R6 and R10 CU to R10 CU. Your deadline for action is April 13th. So zoning in the area is predominantly residential. The site itself is R6 with a tiny sliver of R10 on the easternmost boundary there, and then surrounding zoning is also R10. There is some mixed-use zoning to the southeast there. An aerial view of the site, and then some additional views of the site. Currently, there are IMAPs and Google show 4 buildings, so 1 on each property. The middle 2 are duplexes, and then I think the other parcels, other properties are divided into multiple units. One condition is proposed to prohibit the apartment building type. Looking at the change between the existing zoning and the proposed zoning, the proposed R10 conditional use would allow some additional units to be built. It wouldn't allow additional types of housing to be built since the apartment building is restricted, so single family, attached, detached, and townhomes. Looking at the transportation and energy analysis, this site has pretty good access to existing transit. It does have a lower walk score than average and a lower bike score than average. Costs of transportation are relatively low here, and job access is relatively high. The site is served by a few different routes here. Route 18 and 18S go south, and then not shown on this map, but it was included in the staff report, Route 19 travels along Pool Road just north of the site. The request does not include subsidized units, but it does potentially add to the housing supply, would allow for a variety of housing types beyond just single family, smaller units, smaller lots, again, within walking distance of transit. This area has a higher proportion of residents of color, higher proportion of low-income households, higher proportion of individuals with less than a high school education, and older adults. Rent is also increasing faster here than the city as a whole. The request is consistent with the future land use map designation of moderate scale residential. It is within a frequent transit area, but this is a residential district. So as before, a frontage would not be applied to residential districts. Again, consistent with a comprehensive plan, consistent with the future land use map. A number of consistent policies here. Inconsistent policies, it would, by restricting the apartment building type, does limit some of the housing variety that could be built on the site. No outstanding issues here. Your deadline for action, again, is April 13th. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Amy Kraut. I'm an attorney at Smith Anderson, and I'm representing the property owners, Southern Purchasing Group, and Felco. In this case, I also have Nathan Becker and Phil Wheeler with me to help answer any questions if you have them. We're asking that you recommend approval of this rezoning request. To give a little bit of context and background about the request, these are the 4 parcels or properties that are consist of the address. These were recombined into the 4 lots that you see now back in September of 2023. There are actually a total of 9 residential units on the 4 lots currently. The staff report noted 10, but it's not shown on Google Maps yet, but 627 has been demolished since then based on permitting. 611 is currently a 5-unit multifamily building. Again, 627 is now vacant, but 619 and 623, there are 2 duplexes. We just wanted to note briefly, because it's mentioned in the application, 3 out of 4 of Those units are currently Section 8 housing, and there's no intent to redevelop those units at this time. Just for some context, the development over to the east, it's the Montage community. These property owners and applicant are the same people that developed the community, and the intention here is to develop something similar on 611 and 627, which leads to the purpose of this request. So we're requesting that we rezone from R6 and R10 CU to just completely R10 CU. As staff noted, there is a sliver that's R10 CU already, but this is existing from that Montage development and has some extraneous conditions on it. So this piece got recombined into those addresses, and we just want to make the zoning consistent for the entire site. Again, the underlying reason for this rezoning, I think as you saw in the staff report, there have been some subdivision plans submitted, and they've tried really hard to make a townhome community work under R6 and under frequent development, transit option. You know, they've tried a couple different options, and it's just not working. The R10 gives them a little bit more flexibility to build what they need on this site. So we have carried over that prohibition on the apartment building types to match the neighboring property. Otherwise, as staff noted, this is consistent with the future land use map and comprehensive plan. It does make the property zoning consistent with the properties immediately to the east, west, and south, which are already R10. Even that property to the west is already R10, so we're kind of that sliver of R6 right there. We would request that this request provides greater housing choice by increasing housing supply and improving housing affordability. And it's in a transit supportive area of the city, so we ask that you approve this request and are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move to the opposition. Any opposed to this project will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table for thoughts from commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
So the parcels, the adjacent parcels, I think this is for the applicant, that the R10 that you're matching, do those parcels prohibit apartments?
The Montage, this community here, yes, they do. Those prohibit apartments.
I'm concerned about that condition for this rezoning. I mean, it's a frequent transit area. I just don't think we should limit types of housing in a frequent transit area. I noted that you said the frequent transit development option wasn't working. Could staff explain, because there's always confusion around the density bonus, the frequent transit development option, the TOD, what this applicant, how the FTDO would work in this case?
Sure, let me just pull up the option here.
Eventually, I'm going to make me a cheat sheet that I always have.
I know, between the TOD and the FTDO, there's some, and there are also, the FTDO works differently in mixed-use districts and residential districts. So this would be under R6, the existing zoning. The lot dimensions would be 4,000 square feet. Under the proposed zoning R10, the minimum lot area would be 2,500 square feet. So a change there. And then as far as the height bonus, so height would be limited, or total units would be limited to 12 under this option, unless the applicant provides at least 20% of those units at a rate that's affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income. That's for residential districts. It's a little bit different for mixed-use districts.
To follow up on that, how high can it go if affordable units are included?
It's still 3 stories.
Oh, I just
yeah,
mean,
for
I just mean
residential.
total. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat. Total units is what I was referring to. How many?
Total
'Cause you said
units?
12 if they were all market rate.
Yeah. Let's see. So the entitlement here is 42 units. So I think the trade-off is they could build the setbacks and development standards are a little bit different under the frequent transit development option. So if they choose to use the FTDO, they could build to those standards and more than 12 if they include affordability.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners?
I guess I'm curious from the applicant. You said, this this request would only increase it by 3 total units. And it seems like there is some flexibility allowed if the FTDO bonus is utilized. So I just was curious if you could be more detailed on why it wouldn't work.
Sure. I think just under R6, the way the lots are shaped and with the site plan and the intent to do townhomes here, there's a lot of conversation back and forth with staff on whether or not they could build the number of units that they wanted. And they were very close and there are a couple options, but it just wasn't quite enough, which we do think the R10 gives us what we need and is consistent with the zoning of the surrounding area.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
My struggle is that we've acknowledged there's Section 8 residents living there now. This is in a lower income census tract. I heard the applicant say there's no intention right now to redevelop the duplexes that are serving Section 8 individuals. However, with market rate townhouses being built around them, I'm just concerned about what happens to the people that are living there, where obviously there is a market for people of lower incomes in this frequent transit area, which is exactly where we would want them to be. I know we can't require an applicant to take advantage of the FTDO or the density bonuses, but I am concerned that that there is a potential to displace persons of lower income in exchange for individuals paying market rate rents, when we have an option that could better serve the people who are currently living there.
Other thoughts from commissioners?
Yeah, I also share that thought. I think by allowing this, we would kind of undermine our own incentives that we've created in our UDO.
Any other thoughts from the commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Let me pull it up. Sorry. Regarding case Z5823, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend denial of the zoning amendment.
Second.
A motion and a second. Was there further discussion at the table? It seemed like maybe someone was grabbing a mic, perhaps not. Okay, then all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion fails, 3-4. Do we have an alternative motion or additional discussion?
I'll make the recommendation to approve, and I recognize my fellow commissioners' concerns. I think this development has the potential to provide a type of housing that's desperately needed in this neighborhood, in this area. I don't think we're going to get the super high-end single-family houses and townhouses. These look like they're going to be market rate, middle market housing, and I think I'd like to support that. So let me look up my, sorry. Yeah. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner O'Haver has seconded. Any further discussion or debates on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? And those opposed? That motion passes 4-3. Take extra good notes on this one, since I'll be asked about it. And those opposed, sorry, trying to update my notes really quickly. Specifically cited the concerns about undermining the FTDO, the use of the FTDO incentive.
And displacing people in affordable housing with market rate housing. I really hope we are keeping track of all the times when an applicant has the opportunity to use the FTDO or the density bonus, and they're not.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to item E6, rezoning case Z6423 at Summit Avenue. This case is to change approximately 0.92 acres from RX4 urban limited frontage to RX4 with no frontage. And we will turn to Sarah Shaughnessy for a presentation from city planning staff.
Hello again. So this is a city-initiated rezoning request. I'll walk through your typical staff analysis, and then my colleague Steve Ma is also here representing the city as the applicant and has a short presentation. As Chair Miller said, this is a request to rezone about 2/3 of an acre to remove the urban limited frontage. The intent there is to allow for additional building types. Currently, the tiny homes are not allowed. So your deadline for action is April 13th. Zoning in the area is predominantly residential to the north surrounding the site, and then there's some industrial and commercial mixed-use zoning to the south. Here is an aerial view of the site. It's just across the street from Eliza Pool Park. Very good access to the Walnut Creek Trail, and again, some residential and older unused industrial zoning around it. Some views of the site. No proposed conditions. Again, entitlement does not change except that the building types allowed would be expanded. And just for some reference, I think the building type that would be permitted, one of them is a tiny home development. And so for reference, here are the standards there. Happy to go back to those if you have questions. This site is in an area of the city that has a very high walk score, high transit score, high bike score, low transportation costs, and good access to jobs. Currently served by South Saunders and the Carolee route, Route 21, also very close to the Southern Corridor Bus Rapid Transit. The request adds to the housing supply. As a city-initiated rezoning, the request is for proposals that would include subsidized housing. So the intent here is to provide affordable housing on a city-owned site. Would permit a variety of housing types, smaller units, smaller lots, again, within walking distance of transit. Some demographics in this area, higher proportion of residents of color, higher proportion of low-income households, lower than or less than high school education, and rent is increasing at a faster rate here. Request is consistent with the moderate scale residential zoning envisioned by the future land use map. The removal of the frontage is inconsistent with its location on the urban form map, which is within a BRT transit station area. An urban frontage is recommended here. Again, there's the trade-off between wanting to allow additional building types and provide the frontage. Consistent overall with a comprehensive plan. Number of consistent policies here. The one inconsistent policy noted is the frontage policy. And then no outstanding issues. Again, your deadline for action is April 13th.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for the applicant and those in favor. You have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Oh.
Good morning. Just give me 1 second. Escape. Okay. Right. Okay, thank you. Alrighty. There's no. There you go. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to bring my IT person. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair. I'm Steve Ma from Plan Dev. I am the applicant for this case. Some of you are probably familiar with it already, so I'll be brief. Thanks to Sarah for presenting the case. And also we have CJ Valenzuela from Housing and Neighborhoods. He works with us on a lot of the affordable housing projects. So as you guys probably know, this project was initiated from the Dick's Edge study. This is one of a few parcels of city-owned land. It was rezoned from R6 to RX4UL, at which point we issued an RFP out for affordable housing developers to bid on this property. We only got one bid, and we discovered that there was some difficulty in conforming to the urban limited frontage. So it's gone back to council for a reauthorization to rezone this property, and here we are. Very quickly, if you look at sort of the bottom row, that's the urban limited frontage and the housing types it allows. You'll see that for all intents and purposes, the only residential types allowed are townhouse and apartment. We're talking about a site that's like 2/3 of an acre. Just going back to the map, you'll also see that around the site, there is no other urban frontages. I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So the purpose of the urban frontage is to provide some kind of continuity of an urban form, and you'll see that it would be very difficult to have that kind of continuity because of the surrounding parcels. There's a substation next to it. There's the sewer treatment plant diagonal from it. There's a city-owned parcel to the right of your screen there that's in a floodplain and difficult to develop. And there's also a Duke Energy easement from the substation that cuts across the first 50 feet of this property. So where you would want street wall and urban frontage, well, you're going to have to be 50 feet behind that anyway because of the power line that runs through there. So the alternative then is by removing the frontage, it would allow single detached, attached houses and tiny homes. The one bid that we did get, it had tiny homes in a cottage court configuration, so that increases the density to something a bit more mid-scale, and also, I think, more suitable to the neighborhood that it's adjacent to. So summary, as we mentioned, the building types, they would allow for more. That would allow the bidders for our reissuance of the RFP to have more options to create affordable housing. And of course, since we're not changing the underlying zoning, all the development intensity remains the same. So there won't be any more or less additional density because of this action. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Continuing with public comment, are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? And seeing none, we'll turn to public comment for those in opposition. Any opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we will turn it back to the table. Any thoughts from our commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Sure, yes, Commissioner Bennett.
This is another one that conflicts me. I've had a lot of conflicting ones today. And the reason it conflicts me, I have to say something because I was so vehemently opposed to this when we saw it the first time. It was part of a larger one. Because I didn't like the location of it and it being designated specifically for low income. I felt like it was an environmental justice issue. But since it has been approved, I would hate to limit an affordable housing developer's ability to develop on it since the rezoning went through. I'm trying to balance that with how vehemently opposed, and I have to say vehemently because I think this might be like the second case only that I felt so strongly about. So I'm just trying to balance that out. However, if I should vote in opposition to this, it's not because I don't favor affordable housing. It's just because I didn't like the location of this and its specific designation as affordable housing. It felt wrong to me.
May I follow up?
Yes, please.
I think it might have been when it was combined with another parcel, or?
We separated them out.
Okay.
And I
it was
voted no
still-
for both because I was opposed to the entire location.
Okay, okay. Is this particular parcel have floodplain mapped on it?
No, across the street there is, but not here.
But not here,
It's adjacent to the Greenway and so the creek down that way.
In that case, Chair Miller, I'm ready to support this one.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I totally understand the flexibility. I understand it's trying to allow tiny homes, but is the idea that it would be, when you say tiny homes, are you just meaning smaller apartments, or are you meaning actual tiny, single-family tiny homes on this?
It's a designation, it's a building typology in the UDO, so it's one of the one of the building options that you can select. And also it utilizes them in a cottage court configuration, which is also another sort of development option.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't just mean small homes in general. I think there's a definition for them. I believe it's 1,200 square foot max, 800 on, I could be wrong, but yeah, it's a known separate thing in the UDO.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and I asked that just because it already, like, as we said, was previously requested to get a 4-story height. So I was just trying to picture what that would look like.
Any further discussion on that topic? Look, none? Okay. Would Commissioner Fox like to continue with her motion?
Absolutely. Regarding case Z 6423, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated February 13th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Commissioner Otwell has seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? 6. Those opposed? 1. Okay, that motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. And to clarify for the record, Commissioner Bennett, the vote in opposition is due to the location of this affordable housing project, or placing affordable housing in this location specifically due to the proximate floodplain?
No, not the floodplain, the water treatment plant, the other hazardous waste facilities within close proximity. It feels like the definition of an environmental justice issue.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, that concludes our old business. So we now move on to approval of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes on the agenda from our last Planning Commission and Committee of the Whole regular meetings. Any comments on either of those minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Otwell has motioned, McCrimmon has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to other business, report of the chair. I will not be here at our next regular meeting, so Vice Chair Raines will be chairing that meeting. He is not here today, so I'll also give the report of the Vice Chair, which is the report with respect to the Committee of the Whole. Our next Committee of the Whole meeting is next Thursday, February 22nd at 4 p.m. to continue the discussion of Z4023 at Strickland Road, the affordable housing project in the Falls Lake watershed. Could I get a quorum check? Who's able to attend that meeting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe Vice Chair Raines would be there, as Committee Chair Raines would be there as well, so that would be 6 for a quorum. Thank you very much. Just write that down for him. Then we can, and I'll also note that we want to clarify the time and location of each of these committee meetings because I believe in the report of the Assistant Director, they may be listed incorrectly in that report. So just to highlight that for all of those who are watching, the information that we provide live today is the correct information, and we will update that report of the Assistant Director in the future. So moving down the line.
No report.
The Text Change Committee will meet February 21st at 9 a.m. in this building in room 305. Note the time and the location change.
Was correct, okay. Thank you very much. Is that going to be a standing change or just for this meeting?
I believe the location will be a standing change, but not necessarily the time. The time was changed to get quorum.
I see. Thank you.
Yes.
Room 305.
So is that considered a special meeting? No, okay. Thank you.
Relocation of a regular meeting or a change in the regular meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving down the line.
The next Strategic Planning Committee meeting is March 13th in this building at 4 p.m. In room 303.
Okay, and I have in my records we changed it to 3 p.m. from 3 to 4, but is it 4? Or either, I think in the minutes it says that we changed it to 3 p.m.
To 3? I had in my notes.
In which case we would need to update the minutes, which is fine. We just, from that last meeting, we just need to clarify.
Yeah, let me check. Three p.m.
3 p.m.? Okay.
3 p.m. So March 13th at 3 p.m. I'm just going to note also the committee membership as listed in the report, the Assistant Director is inaccurate. So if you are unsure if you are on that committee, please speak to me after this meeting.
Thank you. Down the line.
I just have a quick comment. I noticed the prohibition against boarding houses pop up in the conditions again today, and it appeared that it wasn't very relevant to what was going to be proposed. I would like to ask planning staff, Ms. Reckow, where applicable, if you could encourage planning reviewers to work with applicants to remove the prohibition on boarding houses where they feel it's appropriate. I think it doesn't have a large impact on what gets developed with these cases, but I think it sends a signal that we don't want to send. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Haber.
No report.
No report.
Okay, thank you. And moving to report of the Assistant Director.
I have nothing to relay that isn't in the backup.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, any other items for the good of the order? With that, we are adjourned. 36 minutes early.